Hi there, I'm Lisa Thomson, author of The Great Escape, A Girl's Guide to Leaving a Marriage. Thank you for joining me today. I am sharing tips for co-parenting. During divorce, after divorce, I have 5 quick tips that you can use right away. So let's get started. Typically, co-parenting, a lot of the things that people complain about, and I know some of my own experiences, I have separated into 3 different categories. And then my tips will help to resolve some of those issues. So number 1, logistics. First category. Just basically the physical arrangement of splitting a house in 2, splitting a family into 2 separate homes. Number 2, emotional. So the emotional fallout that happens during divorce and with the sudden arrangement of co-parenting and shared custody. It's a big adjustment for everyone involved, especially the children. And number 3, cooperation. So those are the 3 categories of problem areas that I try to address. So my first tip, make your trade-off day on Friday instead of Sunday. Often people choose Sunday for their switch day for shared parenting, I guess because it's the end of the weekend, it's the beginning of the work week or the school week. Actually though, Sunday tends to be a bit of a problem for people. You may get the children late in the evening with dirty laundry, homework that hasn't been done, and suddenly you're under this quick deadline to hurry up and get all these things done, or maybe somebody forgot something and tomorrow's Monday morning, and it's a bit of a hassle. The benefit of making Friday the switch day is it's the beginning of the weekend and it's just a more relaxed day to get together. Typically the kids will come over after school and you have no deadlines on a Friday evening. Typically it's more of a social time to relax. And so if the children have forgotten something at their other home, at their other parent's home, it's not like you have to rush out and go get those things now or get homework done right now. You have the whole weekend to catch up with one another, spend time together, and get ready for Monday. So you have 2 full days of getting ready for Monday. So it just works a lot smoother. And I know it worked for us. That was something that we did, and I really felt that that was one of the successes of our co-parenting. So tip number 1, trade-off day on Fridays instead of Sundays. Tip number 2, write up a custody calendar as soon as possible after the separation. Now, I realized that initially at separation there are lots of things going on and lots of the emotional changes and ups and downs and adjustments going on, and sometimes putting together a calendar seems like maybe it shouldn't be a priority. But I would suggest that within the first month of separation, if you and your ex have had a chance to agree upon some sort of custody arrangement, whether it's 50% shared, 50-50, or whether it's, you know, mostly with mom and every other weekend with dad because of the situation, maybe dad travels, whatever the situation is, if it's agreed upon, try to get something in writing as soon as possible. Get an old calendar, photocopy it, or not an old calendar, get a current calendar, photocopy it, and write down week to week where the kids will be, with who, and try to plan ahead for those special occasions like Christmas and holidays, because those are always a bit of a bone of contention between the parents. So tip number 2, getting your calendar together. Another thing I should mention is once that calendar is put in writing, it gives your situation a precedent, a legal precedent, so that in the future, in the near future, if one of the parents changes their mind or wants to challenge the current custody arrangement, it becomes a little bit harder for them to change it because there has been a historical setup in writing and an agreement between the two of you, the judges and the lawyers will look at that and say, okay, this was the history of the case, and it's more likely that that will continue or be maintained unless there are some major issues or problems. So that's the other advantage of getting your calendar and your agreement into some sort of written form. Tip number 3, communicate with your ex as openly as you possibly can. This is a difficult part of the co-parenting. Suddenly the relationship that you had with your spouse is completely broken, and the only thing that's keeping it hanging on together is the children. And sometimes the emotional fallout of the breakup can obviously cause a lot of bitterness, and it falls through onto communication about the children. So what I recommend is to try to keep that communication open, try to keep it about the children and not about the two of you, and try to avoid telling the children your plans with them before you tell your spouse. So the communication is between you and your spouse, ex-spouse, not between you and the children always, and informing the children, for example, tell your dad you're not going to see them next weekend because we have whatever planned with grandma and grandpa. You can see how that can cause a problem with dad. Isn't going to like to hear that all of a sudden he doesn't get the kids, and hear it through the children and not through you yourself. So keeping those lines of communication open is very important. If the telephone is too emotional, then definitely go to email. I would say texting is probably not the best because it is so intrusive and so immediate, and it almost interferes with someone's day, a meeting, whatever they have going on. It's best to stick to the email so that people can process information and have a little bit of time to get back to the person. But everyone, that's a personal decision, but just to be aware of the communication. Tip number 4, have an inventory of basic requirements for each child at each of the homes. So this is pretty straightforward, but just as an example, you could have, extra clothes, maybe a gym outfit for kids for phys ed at school, things that are necessary but might get forgotten at the other parent's house, socks and underwear, just some of those basic necessities. Always have extras of those, toiletries. This will make the children also feel that they're more welcome, more at home, and not so panicked if they have actually forgotten something at dad's or mom's. So that always works quite well, and it's good in a pinch to have that backup. Now, last tip, but not the least, be and do what you promised. So if you say you're going to be there to pick the children up at a certain time, do your best to follow through with that promise. I've seen kids waiting and waiting and waiting for their parent to come, and it's on top of everything, it's just sad to make them wait. One of the worst things is if you are told to pick your children up at a certain time at the other parent's house, and you get there and no one's there. It's just very frustrating for everybody, and once again, a promise is not being followed through. So because of so many people being involved, it's very important to follow through with what you say you're going to do and to try to follow the plan as much as you can. Obviously you have to be flexible and expect some last-minute changes, but I believe co-parenting is successful when everyone is fulfilling their promises and maintaining the arrangement to the best that they can. So those are my 5 quick tips. Number 1, make your trade-off day on Friday, not Sunday. Tip number 2, write up a calendar as soon as you can to put something in writing for custody and parenting arrangements. Number 3, Communicate with your ex as openly as you possibly can. Use email. And tip number 4, have an inventory of basic requirements for each of the kids at both homes. Tip number 5, follow through with your promises. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any other questions regarding co-parenting, I would be happy to answer them. You can find me on my website at lisathompsonlive.com, and you can fill out the contact form and leave a question for me. Also, I cover a whole chapter on co-parenting with much more information, resources, and tips. So if you're interested in the book, this is available through my website, as well as an ebook on Amazon, iTunes, and Barnes & Noble. Thanks again for tuning in today. Until next time, bye-bye.